You're listening to Never Heard of It, a Night Shift Radio production. I don't know, my brain. It hurts so much.
So it's strange to think about because time has no meaning anymore, but it was just yesterday for us, but like an entire week ago for our listeners, when we had my brother on to record an episode.
Yeah.
We talked about Snake Outta Compton.
Yeah, we
And
did.
after we stopped rolling, Joshua informed us that the band Coheed and Cambria had gotten together with Rick Springfield, Rick Springfield,
Correct.
and made a Jesse's Girl 2. And it turns out it's an absolute banger. It's a fucking certified jam, and I haven't been able to stop listening to it.
It's awesome. I think so. If I remember correctly, Rick Springfield has a really weird day in, like, a thing in court about Syracuse.
Really?
Yeah. So this apparently happened. Is that in 2004, Rick Springfield was dancing with a woman on stage at the concert.
Okay.
And bumped her with his butt so hard that it knocked her unconscious.
What?
It's true. So this happened. So the 2004 State Fair, Rick Springfield bumped a 45-year-old woman so hard with his butt that he was being very aggressive. And he bumped her, and that it knocked her over, and she was unconscious.
Amazing. I mean, terrible. That sounds like really bad for this person, and like it's not funny, but it's also hilarious.
Yeah, this is an insane story, and apparently the judge ruled in favor of Rick Springfield, saying that he meant no intentional harm to this woman. She was on stage. He was up, like, he had his like foot up on one of like the monitors and was like rocking his butt, and she was right there, and he just like bonked her, and she blop 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 and bonked her head and went unconscious. And yeah,
that's not. I mean,
it happened.
That sounds like a legitimate accident.
Shit, she should never go to a rock show. The amount of times they knock people over. Damn.
Yeah. I mean, no victim blaming here, but at the same time, like, that's not really a court case.
Right. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So speaking of falling over, knocking your brain, I don't know. My brain hurts, man. Hello and welcome to the Never Heard of It podcast. I'm your host, Michael Fight.
And I am Caleb 3.
See, what's funny is that's such a meta reference, because it's a reference to the movie, but it's a reference to something else. So we're doing a whole month of listener requests. So last week we had a request for the movie Snake Outta Compton, and then we forced the listener, who was Caleb's brother, to come on and talk about the movie. And he regretted requesting that movie. This week, however, we got this request about this movie, a time travel movie called Primer. And oh boy. Now, I want to preface by saying, so we normally do this at the end of like the should you watch this movie, and so I'm going to preface it right off the bat and say this movie is probably one of the most amazing time travel movies I have ever watched in my life. Okay. I think I can factually say it's probably the best time travel movie I've ever watched in my life.
It is definitely one of the most fascinating and brain-bending time travel stories. It is a thinking man's time travel story, and not just I went back in time and saved the planet.
because it's
sort of
not an
story.
adventure film.
It's
That's the
not.
thing. Most time travel movies are like, we've got to go, we got to go back in time and save them, blah, 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 and then there's things coming, and there's an adventure. It is not that kind of movie.
It's not. It's not an excellent adventure.
It is not an excellent. It's not a bogus journey.
It's not a bogus journey, and
Right.
nobody has to face the music.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I
No
saw.
pictures of fading people.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I saw a photo from a drive-in theater somewhere that was doing a double feature of Bill and Ted Face the Music and Scott Pilgrim.
Oh,
And
that's
how
a good
fun would
double
that
feature.
be?
That's a
Because
really good double feature.
you know how much you and I both love Scott Pilgrim versus the World.
I mean, that is literally one of the best movies ever made, and I will die on that hill with a lot of other people. I think there'd be a lot of people at that hill.
It would be a crowded hill. In
It would
fact,
be very crowded hill.
it would not be safe to be on that hill right now because there'd be too many people and you'd be too close together and you'd all die from the virus. So when you say you would die on that hill, you'd die from COVID.
Or I would die from too many people being on the hill, and I would get knocked off the hill because it's so crowded. I'd fall down.
Especially if Rick Springfield was on the hill, he'd probably knock you off with his ass.
Full circle, everybody. Full circle. So so we're gonna start with this movie, Primer. So now, preface this movie. I was able to watch it on YouTube. I found a version of it that had Japanese subtitles.
Look at you!
But it is you do have to rent it.
Yes, I rented it from the traditional iTunes store.
Yeah.
The historical record.
The historical records.
And I was trying to make some like deep joke about that being like dated, but I mean it's still relevant.
It is. Yeah. So when this movie was first requested, I had thought I'd already seen this movie. And now I don't know the movie that I thought this was, but it was not this movie.
It's funny because the cover art makes it look like it might be more of like a horror or like maybe thriller-esque type movie. It looks kind of ominous. It looks like almost like a Saw type movie. And so when you first showed me the link and said, this was requested because it was a CJ that requested this?
CJ, yep.
Yeah, shout out to CJ for requesting this one. We're making sure that we acknowledge every person who makes a request. And as you heard me mention last week, and as I made sure to point out over on our website, thenohoit.com, we can't get to all of the amazing requests that we got when we put out that call for submissions. We can't get them all this month, but we will get to them. We promise. And if we dropped the ball and forgot to respond to you, know that we will still watch your movie if it's at all humanly possible. So thank you very much. But yeah, when you first sent me this link and said we're gonna watch this, I was like, I don't really know, dude, because that looks
scary.
It looks scary. But then I actually remembered, like, you and I have talked about this, and I can't remember if it was on the show or not. But I was watching a kind of an illustrated explanation of like time travel in cinema, but not necessarily like time travel methodology, but more like consequence and causality and stuff like that, and like the way in which time travel affects the traveler's timeline. And this movie was specifically mentioned in how like bizarre it is and how like it loops and creates alternate timelines, and like there's some mind bending going on with this. And so once I realized that was the movie that we were looking at, then I got really excited. But this movie was from 2004, so it's been around for a while now. 16 years.
Yeah, so this movie is a really interesting story. So the story of this movie. So the estimated budget for this movie was $7,000.
Okay.
So essentially, the writer and director who also plays Aaron in the movie is Shane Carruth, and Shane Carruth is he was an engineer, had worked on some films. He actually worked on the Allegiant movie.
Neat.
Just in the crew. And he decided to make this movie. Now, this movie falls under a category. Now, I have to admit, I work in film, and I was not aware of this category, but this category falls under this indie film thing called mumblecore. And
Huh.
yeah, so the idea of mumblecore film is specifically, it's more prevalent in indie film, is that the conversations are meant to feel more real.
Yeah.
So it's not, there's not any structure to the conversations. There's no like, I'm going to state a thing. You're going to respond to a thing in perfect timing with a really great quip. And then I'm going to respond back. Like, it's very like, no, I'm going to talk, you're going to talk, and we're going to kind of talk over each other sometimes. And, oh, I don't know. I'm just going to like say a bunch of things, but none of it really seems planned. Like everything
Yeah.
seems very ad libbed.
Yeah.
And that's this style. And that's this director. So he had done this and then another film called Upstream Color, that he had also done in 2013. And this one, I think I've actually seen Upstream Color, and I think it's super messed up, but I do not remember all of it.
I mean, you thought you'd seen Primer, so.
I mean, shit, I probably didn't even see Primer. I don't even know.
Did you even watch it for this episode? Like,
no, I'm just gonna guess at what happened.
It was crew for a movie called A Ghost Story.
Nice.
Which looks interesting as well. But yeah, so it catches your attention right away as like it is very much a low budget film. In fact, I took note that the end credits, in addition to being styled in a very kind of interesting way, were probably the shortest end credits I've ever seen for a full length feature film.
There's like 12 people worked on this movie.
Yeah. It was like maybe 15 seconds worth of scroll. To the point where, like, a lot of times at the end of movies, I'll use the like skip 10 seconds or skip 15 seconds, whatever it is, button, just to see like, is there any mid-credit content? Is there any end credits? Is there anything like interesting in the credits? And there wasn't time to hit that button. It was over so fast.
Yeah.
So like very, very like unpolished visually, and the audio as well. But yeah, it was really fascinating that's a style specifically, and not just an approach that they took for the dialogue, because it was very just kind of scattered and random, and at times it just kind of like the whole first 10 minutes just felt like they were arguing about nothing.
Yeah, it definitely feels like you just get dropped into a middle of a conversation with no context, and you're like, who the fuck are these people? What the fuck are they talking about? What are they even doing?
There's also a narrator, and so like sometimes it's like, oh wait, that audio quality difference is because we're hearing the narrator, and the narrator is a pre-recorded voice, we learn.
Yeah.
And so like it's neat.
It's crazy. So before we get too deep into this movie, let's go ahead and get some stuff out of the way first. So first of all, we want to thank Blue Microphones. So Blue Microphones, we at Night Shift Radio have entered a deal with Blue Microphones. They sent us a bunch of microphones for a project that we're working on, separate to the 5 shows that you are aware of now.
It's going to be real good. It's going to be
exciting. Really cool. So we want to thank them. So powered by Blue Microphones. Thanks a lot, guys, for sending us some stuff. So that's going to be pretty cool. If you haven't seen so, check out on our Twitter and stuff. We've been posting photos of what we're using those things for, and it's going to be pretty exciting. And that being said, join us on our social media. So we are available at the Nahoit Podcast. That's the NHOIT Podcast on both Twitter and Instagram. You'll see clips from past episodes, current episodes, let you know what's coming up, where to watch it, that kind of stuff. And it's a great way to quickly interact with us. You can tweet at us, tag us on Instagram. If there's a movie you're like, oh my God, tag us in a trailer or something.
Yep.
We would love that. But if you are more formal and would like to submit something, Caleb, where could they go?
Oh, well, we kind of touched on this a little while ago, but we have a web presence over at thenohoit.com. That's THENHOIT.com. And that actually just recently got a little bit of a facelift for this month, brand new. So we've got our brand new Nahoit logo, which is styling, and does feature our incredibly awesome hand-drawn avatars by our friend Ethan Kosak, who was with us for the Troll 2 episode.
Oh man, way
If
back
you remember,
when.
way back. And of course, we always update that site with a list of what we're going to be watching for the month. So in case you want to check out in advance and watch along with us, give links to trailers, and then also point you in the direction of where you can find the movie streaming if they're available. And even more important than that is that's where that contact form is. So you can fill that out and let us know how you think we're doing. If you think we suck, if you think we're awesome, or if there's a movie you want us to watch. So we're doing the whole month of September, but we're already planning out for later this fall and winter to do another one of these listener request months. So we could be talking about your movie real soon. So send it our way.
Yeah, and then of course nightshiftradio.com/shows. Check out all our other currently 5 shows, potentially more very, very soon. But yeah, so currently 5 shows. You can check them all out and give them a listen. And the last thing, if you guys want, we have a hashtag
Yeah, we do.
Night Shift Radio, and you can totally send us money to either be like, hey, here's some money, I think you're awesome, keep doing things, or like, here's $5, please never speak again.
Do you think we could get Calvin Hall to hashtag us money for our pain and suffering from watching his shitty movie?
He owes us $20,000
at least.
I've put that on the books. Like I'm counting that as like, I'm gonna send him an invoice from Night Shift Radio, being like, hi, this is money you owe. Like this is in our accounts receivable. Put it into your accounts payable. Like, you owe us this money in 90 days. Please, please don't make me report it. But anyways, all right, all that out of the way, let's talk about Primer. So Primer begins, as we mentioned, it drops you into the middle of a conversation of 4 Mormon-ass looking dudes.
In like very poorly fitting white button-ups and like khaki trousers and ties. Like,
yeah,
they look like exactly what you expect when young people without a lot of money are told that they need to dress nice for work, and they go and buy whatever they can fucking afford, to fit the bare minimum criteria of like business attire, and it always looks terrible.
But in this case, this is exactly their character. It works.
Yep.
It's exactly what it should be. So we meet 4 people. So specifically, we meet Aaron, Abe, Robert, and Philip. Right? Is that
that's
4?
the ones? Yes, that's all 4.
Because that's pretty much the only 4 people in the movie, so it wasn't that hard to figure out.
There's so few people.
Yeah. So right off the bat, we see them. They're talking, and again, this is part of that mumblecore indie thing where they're talking to each other, but they're all kind of talking on each other. Nobody's really saying anything specific. It's really hard to understand. Like, they're around of a bunch of equipment, like they're pulling apart a fridge. They've got like car batteries. They're talking about all the different, like, they're like, oh, well, it's like engineer type terms, like, oh, well, if but if it's 13 joules over these 5 gigawatts, not really. Like, it was just very like, but I mean, the thing that I thought that impressed me the most with this movie, even though it's a time travel movie, is that there was not a lot of jargon.
No,
it seemed like a lot of it seemed very like, this is probably the most practical time travel movie I've ever watched.
And they don't even try to present it as like, we're trying to do time travel. Like, they're not. Right. In fact, they're building a thing. Yeah, and they talk about this project. They've tried to like create patents. They're trying to find something that sticks. And we learn that there's a character who we never see, but it goes by the name of Platt. Who at one point screwed them over on an invention that they had, and has since made a lot of money, and so that's created some tension and animosity there. But they're trying to make something work. So it kind of feels like they're like kind of a proto like tech startup. And so they're taking apart the hardware, like you mentioned. They disassemble a fridge for copper tubing. We see them gutting a microwave and like using like the shielding and stuff like that from it. But we get a sense that they don't even really know what they're building. They're trying to accomplish something, and they're just hoping that whatever they manage to accomplish with this is monetizable. Monetizable? Can be
Yeah,
monetized?
can be monetizable.
Is of monetary value,
Yes.
and somehow stumble into time travel. And it's roughly like an hour and 20 minutes long, and it's at least at the half-hour mark before they even start to think about discussing the idea that they may have discovered time travel. So it's a very slow burn at first, and I love that.
Yeah. And actually, I mean, it's the whole movie. The whole movie has like a, where most films has like it rises up to a specific point, it hits a climax, and then that's your turning point, and then the movie kind of travels down from there to like resolve everything. This movie is just a straight line up. So it is like, hey, we're going to do these weird things and pull apart these things, and you don't really know why, and we don't really know why, and we're not going to tell you why halfway through the movie. Oh, I think we've done a thing. It's really odd. Oh, shit, this must be time travel. Well, we're going to do time travel. Okay, we're going to do it again, and then again, and then again, and then again, and oh, fuck! And that's like where, and then the movie just ends like that. Like it ends with like, it ends on the climax of the movie. There is resolution to a degree, but it is such a weird, it's a weird journey, man. Like this movie, fuck, it's a journey.
It just made me think like the gang does time travel.
100%. That's 100%. Like I felt like fucking Charlie Day. Like, okay, so
With the charts.
with the chart, like that's what I felt like afterwards watching this movie. So CJ and I, we watched this movie somewhat together. We're separated by about an hour at the moment, and it was just like us texting back and forth, like, what the fuck, what? And it was just texting back and forth, like, I don't know what that means. So afterwards, since I was on YouTube, a video popped up after I watched this movie by London City Girl or London Film Girl.
London City Girl, yep.
London City Girl. So shout out to London City Girl. And it was basically an illustrated step-by-step guide about what the fuck happened in this movie. And I watched this movie and I'm like, I don't like I can't even, like, there was no linear thoughts left in my mind. Even though this is a very linear movie for time travel. It was pretty cool. And so we watched this walkthrough, and okay, blah. There is no way you can watch this movie and not watch this explanation and have any fucking clue what's happening in the movie. Like, if you watch Primer and you're like, oh, easy. Abe and Aaron, they do this thing. Abe goes back, then he comes back again, but he set the thing for way before it, and then he comes all the way back, and he's got to redo everything and undo all the shit that happened, and now he's living a great life in France, selling his shit to wherever. Like, if you caught that after one time watching this movie, you're a fucking genius, because shit.
I might have some news for you, because the London City Girl Primer 2004 illustrated explanation on youtube.com did clear up a couple of specific points to me that I wasn't entirely sure of, and like a couple things that, like, I got momentarily distracted by like a work thing or whatever and looked away and maybe missed a small detail. But I pretty much understood the basic mechanics, and I mean,
okay, so all I'm saying is that was a really long explanation to call me an idiot. I don't like, that was just, you took a really long time to be like, you're a fucking idiot.
I just, I'm trying to be delicate with your feelings.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that.
I mean, it could just be because I have such an obsession with time travel that, like, this type of scenario is not lost on my brain, and is very possibly what is actually happening in my life and why I keep seeing copies of myself around.
You're fucking up. You're supposed to be holing yourself up in a hotel room. Like, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
So, okay. So again, we've got our four guys, but really the movie centers around Aaron and Abe. Aaron and Abe are really the main characters of this movie, and they're really the driving force to this. So, and what's really interesting is that the movie starts off making you think it's Abe who's really like the driving force. But then
Mm-hmm.
eventually the movie shifts and you realize that maybe Aaron's the one that's been in control the entire time and
Mm-hmm.
not so much Abe. This is major spoilers. We will say right up front, we are going to spoil the fuck out of this movie. So if you have not watched this movie, first off, sorry, we spoiled that it's about time travel. But two, um, you should watch this movie before you finish this. I think that'd be really important. You should pause, go watch this movie, then come back because it is going to ruin a lot of the cool things about this movie.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. And I also would not hesitate to recommend this movie as something you should watch. So,
Yeah. So right from the get go, we see Aaron and Abe and their two friends for some bit. They're working on this thing, and one of the things we notice, and we're going to point this part out now because we're going to bring it up later. This was actually a theory brought up by London City Girl that I subscribed to. CJ was like, "That's bullshit," but okay. Is at one point they're turning on the machine and kind of figuring out what it does, and at one point Abe puts his hands over top of like a section that's like emanating energy, and he just kind of puts his hands over top of it and does something. And then another section, Aaron reaches his hands in to grab the little matryoshka, the stacking dolls or the nesting dolls. That's one of the things they're using as like the control object to like test what's happening. And so at
mm-hmm.
one point, Aaron dips his hands in there, and another point, Abe has his hands above something else. So we'll bring that up a little later. But they're using the matryoshka, and something that was interesting that I didn't initially get. Maybe they said it, but so it looks like they're using gravity in order to initiate. It looks like they were just fucking with gravity to begin with, but
Yeah,
that's what kind of triggered what they've realized is time travel, right?
because the one of the things that they're initially measuring is like the weight and mass of the item when it's first placed in, and then like after the machine has been running, and they note something that was 7.7 decagrams. I think
Yeah, something like that, and then it
because they
drops
said
to
to
like,
they said to
yeah,
use like by like factor of 10 whatever instead of doing milligrams or grams, but then they measured it later and it was 6.7, so there was a fairly measurable decrease in the apparent mass of the item, and they're like, oh my god, it's gravity. um, but then they start to notice other effects. As you mentioned, when they both had their hands exposed to the machine, they felt some sort of physical response, like a pain response, which kind of makes sense because they don't know what they're messing with at this point.
I mean, yeah, it's just pure energy to a degree.
But then they start to see like a substance growing on the nesting doll in the machine after it's been left in there for a little bit of time, and so they get it tested, and it's like a protein residue from a specific fungus, and the amount that they're finding is super inconsistent with the rate at which this material would form naturally. Like they're finding like a significant amount that would take years worth. They learn, they go and speak to a lab technician who is familiar with this particular fungus. It would take 5 to 6 years to grow the amount that they are seeing, that came from the thing being in the machine for like 5 minutes. I think they said it's some like
Yeah,
very,
it's a very small amount of time.
yeah. And so that is our first indication that there's something time related here, and that's what sets Abe down the path of discovery.
Yeah, and so there's a couple of key scenes with Abe too that are really important to note. So one of the scenes, it's fairly early in the movie. It's actually very early in the movie, and at this point, Abe he's kind of very disoriented a little bit, and he goes to talk to Aaron. And Aaron has he has like a earbud in one of his ears,
Mm-hmm.
and Abe walks up, talks to him. He's like, "Oh, what are you listening to?" And he was like, "Oh, March Madness." And he was like, "Oh, okay." So they have this conversation about like, "Hey, this is when we're going to do this thing," and this is just very logistic conversation of like setting up when they're going to like run the experiment again, other things they need. And we see Aaron sitting there with his earbud and he's responding, and stuff. And that scene's very important. So we're going to go back to that scene as well. And then from that moment, they head off. And this is the very first instant when Abe basically is like, now listen, I think we've done a thing. And he's like, specifically, I've done a thing. So we learned that Abe has created a larger version of this box that they've been using to send back the nesting dolls in in like a you store it type place, like in a storage facility.
Yeah.
And he was like, I'm gonna mess with your mind. Like, I've traveled back in time. So he's basically, the idea is that he turns the machine on at a certain point in time and then lets it ramp up for X number of time. And however long it runs, that's how long you can go back in time when you initiate the device.
Mm-hmm.
So he set the device to go off at 8 a.m., right? Or turns it on at 8 a.m.
They never like specifically address the exact times or days. London City Girl gives us like an analogy based on like 1 week, and she starts at Monday at 8 a.m. Just to give us a reference point. So we can essentially just consider it. Yes, it was Monday at 8 a.m.
Right, just have like a better concept of the time. So he starts it in the morning. And then the idea is that they're gonna hide themselves away. They're gonna completely shut off from the world so that their version that's still existing in the world can't affect the rest of the world, because at a certain point in time, so they're going to basically hold off, and then at a specific point in time in the afternoon, they're going to go and enter the machine after they've basically recapped the day specifically, which it's actually, it's so simple, but it's actually kind of genius. They're monitoring stocks throughout the day. So basically, once the time hits when they're about to enter in the machine, they've taken note of all the stocks that have done really well that day. So now they hop in the machine, they travel back to the morning, and now their second version of themselves are going to go and play the stock market based on all the things they saw it happen during the day, and they're going to start accruing a bunch of money because now they're winning the stock market. So think it's Biff and the Almanac, just in a really smaller and more cleverer scale.
Yeah.
And less noticeable too.
There are like two really interesting things about this right away. One is the mechanic of time travel. We mentioned this is not an adventure story, and there's no like grand scale time travel. You can literally only go back as far as when the machine was turned on. So there's no going back, way back to the past, and there's no going forward at all. You have a distinct set limitation, a set of rules that is clearly defined, which I think is awesome, because so much of what makes up time travel stories is usually just like, well, we'll YOLO it, and like at the end, if it made sense, good. If not, well, it was time travel, so it didn't have to make sense.
Right.
This is
Avengers.
Cool. Yeah, exactly.
Which I love those movies, but
they were great movies. But yeah, I mean, the time, the mechanics were sloppy. They really were. But yeah, so like we have a clearly defined rule set for this, but also we know because of this that they're essentially in a loop of two sets of them, like one that is waiting to go back and one that's in, that has gone back, or that one that's waiting to go back and one that's living out the day as they normally would. So when the one that's waiting goes back, they become the set that's is living out the day. Meanwhile, another set of them is waiting to go back. So that like they're all accounted for. There are two of them in this cycle of going back and forward.
Or so we think. So let's go ahead and take a quick break. When we come back from the break, we will start delving into the larger aspects of what happens with the time travel and how this gets a little wild. So let's go ahead and take a break. We'll be right back.
Do it. You're listening to a Night Shift Radio production. Night Shift Radio is a modern media company bringing you shows that entertain, inform, and most importantly, provide an escape. Never Heard of It dives into the world of bad, obscure, and sometimes just weird movies. Follow along with the crew of Set Condition 1 as they experience the 2004 sci-fi hit Battlestar Galactica, one episode at a time. Each week on Left of the Dial, we explore a new record or revisit an old favorite. We'll bring in guests to talk about their own music and the state of the industry. The Superpod Hero Cast, guys with beers talking about movies with capes. They draw a random comic-inspired movie from Thor's helmet and offer thorough, insightful, and humorous commentary. And once a month, tune into the Storyteller series and get lost in the magic of a good old-fashioned radio drama. Learn more about these fine shows at NightShiftRadio.com and subscribe on your favorite platform.
Hey, welcome back.
Hi.
Oh, hey, what's up? So what's new? We are at the point now where they have started to go back in time. Aaron and Abe have started to go back in time, and they've got this really good cycle where they go in the morning, they isolate themselves in the hotel during the day, and then they pop into the machine and travel back in time. And so the way it works is that when they travel back in time, the second set of them that is, once they go back, they're going to live out the day like normal. And the people that went back in time basically get erased because it basically undoes them, right, for the most part.
It's kind of the essence is like they have now been relegated to the true past, which is gone. It's over. You're not going back to that.
Yeah, which so I think this is interesting. So unlike and again, the modern example is Avengers Endgame, where they're talking about, well, we've gone back in time and set a new timeline that skews off, so you're not going to exist. Everything that happened isn't going to happen again. Whereas in this, everything that happens, they're literally just going back and replaying the day. So there's no fork of timeline. Like, it is literally just, they're just replaying the day. It's just, they hit rewind, they hit play, they're going to go through it again.
And they use the term symmetry too. So that's a big
right.
part of why they go and sequester themselves away, so that the version of themselves who is existing kind of outside time almost is not impacting or influencing the timeline, so that when they go back through and live the day again, they're not interacting with each other, they're not colliding with a change that shouldn't have happened, a conversation that never happened, things like that. So they're keeping this time stream clean, and basically forward, jump back, go again, and go a little bit further forward, jump back, go again. So it's more like a series of bumps along the way rather than any kind of forking or looping.
Yeah, and so seemingly they've got this down pat.
Seemingly.
Right. Nothing's really going to go wrong, except so we do learn that throughout the week of them doing this, it's been now, 2-3 days or whatever of them kind of going, doing this cycle, is we learned that there was a crazy event that happens at a party where an ex shows up to the girl that Aaron is Abe is into.
Yeah, because Aaron is married with a child. Abe has an interest in the form of a Rachel Granger, whose father is
Hermione Granger,
whose father, Thomas Granger, is someone that the team has been interested in wooing for his potential ability to invest in their company. So there's like a little bit of connection there as well. But yeah, so it's Rachel's ex that shows up to this party, and turns out he's a little unhinged, and gets drunk, gets upset, and goes out to his car and brings a shotgun into the party and starts waving it around and threatening people, specifically threatening Rachel.
Yeah. And on top of this, there's another instance in which the hypothetical is put out to Aaron, Abe, and his wife
Kara.
about what would you do if you basically had like unlimited time, like if you could do a day again. And Kara is probably the most wholesome character in this whole thing. She was like, I don't know, I just, take care of my family. It's like, oh, well, that's sweet.
They
You
put
know,
out this like fantastical sum of like if you had like 400 billion and the world was yours and you'd done everything, all the extravagant stuff. You'd bought all the mansions you could buy, and you're matching his and hers yachts and like blah blah blah. What would you do? And she's like, I mean, I guess just help people. Which yes,
yes, I
that is the
mean,
answer.
that is the answer. It's very cute. So, so they all get this answer, but Aaron gives the answer and says, "I would go and punch Platt in the face."
Just put my fist through the flat of his nose.
Yes.
Which,
So,
I mean, I don't know what I guess
I
like
guess,
here, there, here,
yeah,
here.
I guess, I don't
Oh,
know.
noses aren't
I
typically
don't know.
particularly flat.
I mean,
They're
unless you're like
three-dimensional.
a pug or something. You're a
Yeah.
human dog.
Yes.
But yeah, so yeah. So he says he's going to do that, and he does do it, right? He ends up well,
Well,
there's some confusion about it
there's
too.
an instance where Abe is awoken in the middle of the night by some punk ass kids that are setting off car alarms in his neighborhood,
Mm-hmm.
and that
Started
gives.
making trouble in my neighborhood. That's two. That's 2 weeks in a row. That's 2 weeks in a row.
Yeah.
I can't.
Oh,
Damn it.
somebody needs to stop you.
It's true.
It gives them the idea. So he goes to Joey. He goes to Aaron and tells him like, you can do this, because previously like you told him like that there's no way, like we can't do this. So, like there's no way to know like what the repercussions are, and like
Right.
how would you then like you can't just go back and tell yourself not to do it, because like we don't know what the paradoxes are or anything like that. So there's some really interesting, like they put a lot of thought into why that could or couldn't work, to do a thing and then go back and tell yourself not to do it so that you never do it. But he comes up with this idea, says we can do it, and here's why. We go back, we go punch Platt. So you just get to know what that feels like. We get the satisfaction of that. Then we go back again, and this time around we scare off the kids that are funking around in our neighborhood, and I never get woken up by them, so I never come and tell you the idea, so you never do it.
It's got a little bit of Inception to it. Like the idea of like we remove the catalyst that created the thought in the first place. And so they do that, right? And then the other thing is they're like, oh, and then we get to go to the party and try to stop the incident in which the boyfriend comes to stop the shotgun from happening. And
so they start to do that. They agree to do the plan, but as they're driving away, they see a familiar face. It's Mr. Thomas Granger, who Aaron says, like, I swear I spoke to him this afternoon and he was clean shaven. But like this man that I just saw, who I swear is Thomas Granger, is sporting at least 3 days growth. And so there's an implication that somewhere in the future, Thomas Granger starts using the time machine as well. So like that kind of sets off this chain of thought, like, how fucked up do things get that this guy is now using the box?
Right, because I mean, they were the ideas to initially pitch to him about this box. So if they did that at some point in the distant future, whether it's the near or future, like it's 4 weeks from now, he's now able to travel back in time to this point, because at some point in this day, the time machine has been turned on and he has now hopped into it because he's been able to travel back all this time to today, and it's basically driven him mad at this point, to a degree. So he's doing all that. See, it gets complicated. But now here's the other messed up part. They're trying to write down and writing down the stocks and everything like that, but they realize they're both starting to have trouble writing legibly. It keeps getting worse and worse, and they're not really sure why. And they never fully address it in the movie. Although in the YouTube video, London City Girl actually addresses it, is because in the very beginning of the movie, when we see both Abe and Aaron messing with the device as they're building it, both of their hands come in contact with the stream of energy that it's been creating. Therefore, their hands have been sent back in time a short period of time and brought back. So their hands are disconnected timeline wise to their brain. So their brain is sending the signal to write the number 3, but their hands aren't receiving the signal because they're not synced.
Which
It's
is
a really interesting theory.
It's a really interesting theory, and it feels on the surface like it explains it, but I don't buy it because there is a significant amount of time that passes between that incident of them like reaching into the machine and when they first actually travel, like do any real time travel. And it's not until they actually go through the box that anything like that happens. Uh, Whereas if their hands were out of sync, that would have happened immediately when they first stuck their hands in the machines or over the coils, as the case may be. And so they would have been affected pretty much right away. For almost the entire movie, they would have been noticing this. But it was something that was kind of degenerative as they went back through time. So I don't think that she's right on that theory. I think the rest of her explanation is fantastic and spot on, but I think it is more just a degenerative effect of them becoming more and more out of sync with their own timeline and the physical repercussions that happen. They do talk about feeling physical pain when this happens, so it's obviously taking a toll on their body. We see Aaron's ears start to bleed at one point. We see Abe basically faint, and I think that it's more likely that it's degrading something in their mental capability to send those signals from their brain to their hands than it is a matter of them being out of sync because they touched the machine. And that is my theory.
Which is good and definitely makes sense because they, when the first time that Aaron gets in it, the first time that we think Aaron gets into the machine, we're about to talk about that. We learn that Abe is like, it's gonna hurt, but it's not bad. You have to take this Dramamine. Here's this oxygen because you're gonna feel very depraved. Like he's like, so here's how this is all gonna work. And Aaron gets out and he was like, oh my god, like that wasn't just like a static shock. It was really bad. Like this was really bad. And he was like, oh, don't touch me. Oh my god. He's like, he's nauseous. He's obviously in physical, like his body is completely just wrecked. And so I definitely think, they've been basically ripped through gravity. I mean, pretty much like ripped through like the gravity wave. So they draw out a diagram of like the like weight, like how it, circles. I guess this is very relative to Einstein about how his like circle of time does it.
So it makes sense that they would be so focused on gravity initially and then subsequently stumble into time travel, because that's one of the biggest parts of relativity and what physics is trying to understand about time is how gravity itself can like warp space and time and cause them to do weird things, like potentially allow you to circle back on a point in time. It feels like probably the most potentially realistic time travel if they found a way to manipulate gravity, which would subsequently bend space and time.
Yeah. So here's the big part of this movie. So one of the things we learn is that secretly Abe
Secret lover.
So Abe has been setting up the time and introducing it to Aaron, but all the while Aaron already knew this was happening, and he has built a separate failsafe box several hours earlier and started it basically at the start of this whole chain. He had already turned on a machine at the start of the week of when the first time they were to travel back.
Well, he sees the invoices for the storage units and works out that he'd set up basically the initial site where like Abe first introduces Aaron to the concept of time travel via the boxes, but sees that there's a second site and realizes that Abe had set up a fail-safe box to go back farther in time. So in case things went horribly wrong, he could go all the way back and stop the whole thing from starting to begin with, which again is a very interesting idea when you're talking about the causalities and the catalysts of events. But Aaron realizes that and like basically like collapses down a couple of portable versions of the box and goes back himself to start and essentially have a bit more like control over the events as they go rather than trying to stop them.
And so one of the big reveals, every so often a voiceover pops up and it starts explaining like, well, you're going to start doing this and, you're not going to know it at the time. So we know that it's very recorded sounding. So we know that this is a voice from the future or the present if we're thinking that this is a story of things that have happened. And it's basically saying like journaling all of the events that are happening. So what we learn is that voice is actually Aaron, who basically documents this entire week worth of all these crazy events, then goes all the way back to the beginning, ends up having to kidnap himself
hide
and
himself
Abe
up in the
and
attic.
hide himself up in the attic and gives him these recorded messages that basically when we thought Aaron was listening to March Madness all this time because he has his earpiece in the whole time, what he was actually doing was recording the day so that when he gives it back to himself, his now correct version of himself, the final version of himself, can actually listen in, a second before the event happens, listen to it and respond exactly how he responded the first time around to basically set the timeline back to normal, to exactly what had happened before. But because of this, this moment happens again and it triggers a whole bunch of shit because Abe ends up passing out. There's a moment where Aaron forgets and has his cell phone on, and so it's ringing. So there's two instances of the cell phone in the world, and he explains like he's like, oh shit, like which one is answering? Because there's the one of him in the normal world, and then there's the one of the him in the hotel because they both forgot to turn their, the hotel one forgot to turn their cell phone off, but the hotel one answered the question to his wife. So if this one doesn't answer, it resets the whole day and messes the whole thing up. It gets really spiderwebby. And it's really fucking cool. It's just cool. And then, once the movie plays, we won't completely talk about the ending, but, everybody kind of resets. But we learn there's basically the only way to make things right is that there are now 2 copies of Aaron and 2 copies of Abe existing at the exact same time.
There are 3 copies of Aaron.
Oh, 3 copies of Aaron. Right.
Aaron, like, he really janked shit up. There is the version of him that he hid up in the attic, but then a second copy of himself when he went back all the way back to the beginning the second time. This time around, he was put up too much of a struggle for himself, so they had to come to a compromise. And I think that's where the recording came into play. And so that kind of second Aaron goes off and just like off into the sunset and does his own thing, and the third and final one is the one who kind of lives out the rest of the storyline, with the idea that eventually Aaron in the attic can come back and just resume his normal life.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So, and it's wild. And we kind of see, what happens with everyone. So, primer. So should you watch this movie?
Yes.
Fucking yes, you should. Are you kidding me? This is this is the most insane movie. But it's just the most simple and practical approach to time travel in a film I have ever watched, because it's not an adventure. It's not over the top. There's not, we've got to do this to save the world, and there's not this crazy, intervention, and they're not saying like we're going to go back to this exact time period and blah blah blah. Like, it is so practical that watching it I was like, wait, could you do this? Like, could I actually do this? Like,
maybe
it feels real, unlike the rest of the movies where I'm like, time travel is not real. But I watched this movie and I'm like, this feels so like real. Like, this could happen. It was crazy.
Yeah, I'm telling you, like, that's got to be what's happening.
Yeah,
in the real world, like there's some version of this is really happening, and maybe has been happening since this movie came out. Maybe for 16 years.
it's true.
And maybe that's why there's at least 3, if not more, of me wandering around this city.
Around. You keep fucking it up, Caleb. You gotta do it right. Your clones are.
If anyone's gonna fuck up time travel, it'll be me. So.
Yeah. So if you are interested in other time travel movies, so Looper is a really great time travel movie, and it was directed by Rian Johnson, who did Knives Out, fantastic film, and The Last Jedi. And so he had even said that Primer is the best time travel movie ever made. And he made Looper, which was fucking great. So you should watch Looper as well if you've never seen it. Bruce Willis, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, just fantastic.
I'm gonna try to find the video that I referenced at the beginning that first introduced the time travel mechanics of this story to me, so we can possibly link for other people to watch as well. In addition to London City Girls' explanation of this movie, which after watching this movie, I strongly recommend you also watch.
Yeah, I mean, even if you are a super genius and totally get everything from the get-go,
like this motherfucker right here,
it's still really cool to watch because she definitely lays it out with a really great illustrations. She shows clips and she really talks about like the mechanics of the timeline. So it's even, if anything, it's more of like a further study type thing.
And the most important thing that she does is focus on only the important people and elements of the story, because there is a lot, it's a very small cast, and there's not a lot of big happenings, but there's a lot of these one-off interactions and like small characters and stuff like that that really like don't like majorly impact the story or the end results. And so if you're trying just to understand how this works, you can ignore them entirely. They're there as set up for understanding these two characters and what got them to where they started this journey, but they aren't themselves having an impact on the end results.
Yeah, she even says right in the beginning, she's like, there's 4 people, Aaron, Abe, Robert, and Philip. In order to truly understand this story, completely forget about Robert and Philip.
Yeah, Robert and Philip are throwaway characters.
Yeah. They have like a few lines in the beginning and a couple of lines towards the end. Honestly, ignoring them completely is probably your best bet. So if you haven't watched this movie yet and you're going to now, just don't even worry about Robert and Philip. They don't really matter in terms of the major plot.
They don't matter.
They don't matter. Of course they matter. They just don't matter to the story. Anyways, yeah, so should you watch this movie? 100%. I think it's totally worth the rental. If you are big into indie film, if you are big into time travel movies, it's probably worth the buy, because this is probably a movie you're going to want to watch a couple of times. And this is definitely a movie you'll want to introduce to someone when you're like, yo, you want to see a really good indie film? Like, if you want to be that person that's like,
yes,
no, let me show you a real good, like, you're going to buy this movie. That's my thoughts on that. That's all I've got to say about that. Cool. So Primer is available on all the major sites. CJ rented it on Amazon. Caleb, you rented it on iTunes.
Correct.
I found a free version of it on YouTube. that had Japanese subtitles, and it was funny because they kept having the explainer subtitles as well. So like when he mentions March Madness, there was like a Japanese explainer up top, basically explaining what March Madness is.
That's
And
great.
anytime they used slang, it would pop up top and be like, blah 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 in English, and then in Japanese it would explain what I would assume is what that meant, American slang or something that's only, a US thing. But definitely watch it. I mean, in my opinion, like I said, I found it for free on YouTube, but I think it's worth your time for spending the money on it because I think this filmmaker deserves it,
Agreed.
to get the money. And I'm glad that at least one half of my household paid for it, even though I did not.
It's it's rare when we get a chance to truly say like this person did good and like deserves your support.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Indeed. Very
Yes.
rare. Cool. All right. So thanks for joining us, everyone. We super appreciate it. Hopefully you've hit that subscribe button if you're still there. That way you can get notified next week, which is the Beast of War. Another listener request that we got in. We got a very long explanation as to why we need to cover this movie and a little bit of history on the movie. So very excited to find this movie and check it out. I think it's going to be pretty wild.
This will be another one that isn't available streaming free on any of the major platforms, but it is available to rent or buy. I noticed specifically this one was called out as being available on Vudu as well. So if you've gone in on that platform, then you'll be able to find it there. Otherwise, of course, iTunes, Amazon, Google Play, whatnot.
So. Cool. Yeah. And then we close out the month, right? With Stay Tuned. Yeah. So we close out the month with Stay Tuned, a 80s or 90s film starring John Ritter. And that's going to be with Andrea from the Battlestar Galactica fan cast Set Condition 1, which Caleb is the host of and Andrea's one of the co-hosts of. So that's going to be fun to have her on the show and chat about this. So again, thank you so much for tuning in, everyone, and we will see you next time.